And the author team have been or currently are just passionate educators and passionate about student and staff wellbeing. And of course, if you're passionate about student wellbeing, we know how important success is to contributing to that level of, uh, happiness, or that level of enjoying school and enjoying the subject. Scott Cott, he said naively, but kind of, we do aspire, of course, for our students to love mathematics. And it's pretty hard not to love mathematics when you're going pretty well at it. And gosh, it's pretty hard to enjoy mathematics when you're not really feeling much success. And predominantly, that's been the goal of establishing the core series to complement the essential series to give a greater range of ability in the maths classroom to meet with and feel some success, significant success. And I just want to talk and share a few slides, my passion for student wellbeing, and some ideas and thoughts for you. And I hope they are helpful and supportive. You can see the evolution of the diagnostic tool, the evolution of the aspects that we've shifted within the textbooks to try to differentiate, to try to save you time, and we hope they do. Now, interestingly, when I kind of talk about achievement, and having taught for so many years and know the importance of achievement, but actually researching deeply into supporting student achievement, I resonate strongly with this quote by Alfie Kohn. And Alfie Kohn says that actually the first thing about accomplishment, or the first thing about achievement, is actually not focusing on it. And I think this is critically important because it's kind of the go-to of where the student or the family or the teacher sometimes go. What's the target score, or how do I get an A? And the suggestion a little bit is, if you just focus predominantly on that achievement, there is the danger of potentially that leading to competition over collaboration, of increasing levels of anxiety and stress, of potentially leading to unethical behaviour, of copying or cheating, and potentially leading to a lack of intrinsic motivation due to the extrinsic motivator of the achievement. So I think this concept of course, we're passionate about achievement, but can we do this indirectly and subtly? And so the question potentially comes, well, if we're not focusing on achievement, what should we focus on? And we would suggest that you should focus on these three areas. Not exclusive, and I'm sure you could list and think of, as a teacher yourself, other areas. But if we can focus on the students' belief in their ability, their passion and interest in the subject, and the progress, and that's where that diagnostic tool can be so powerful. So let me just talk briefly about all three. So firstly, with this concept of belief and a sense of self-belief. So firstly, a question that I'm not sure whether you have asked your students one-on-one or anonymously and asked them to kind of, give a reply on a little slip of paper, but do they genuinely believe that they can succeed in maths? Because the importance of this sense of self-belief is vital to the actual sense of achievement. This concept of, that many of you will be familiar with, a fixed or growth mindset, is almost the perfect example of a self-fulfilling prophecy. A student with a fixed mindset kind of believes that their ability is kind of fixed in stone and there's not much they can do about it. It doesn't necessarily mean they don't think they're smart, but they just think it was kind of fixed. I was born with these genetics. And the challenge with that is, therefore, when you're struggling and you're coming up against difficulty, and remember, learning's meant to be difficult, maths is meant to be hard, that's a kind of sign that you're learning if it's challenging. And so, but therefore, if they go, this is too hard, I can't do this, a fixed mindset says, well, there's not much point trying. So, you know, that kind of backtracking method that my teacher just explained, which I didn't, maybe that, but it's not going to help me. I'm not really that good at maths. Like I'm a bit fixed in, it won't make much difference. And so you believe that it's not going to make much difference. So not surprisingly, you don't try that hard. And then not surprisingly, because you haven't tried that hard or asked for much help, you go and do an assessment and you don't actually grow much or show much progress. And therefore it confirms. See, I told you I'm not that good at this math stuff. And vice versa, the growth mindset says, gosh, this is hard, this maths, but I reckon I can keep improving. I can keep progressing. I might need to ask some questions from a mate, from the teacher. I might need to check some resources in the book. I might need to do some even more kind of practice. And then, funnily enough, because they try these strategies, unsurprisingly, they then do a bit better. And then there's their self-fulfilling prophecy. I thought I could get a bit better. And guess what? I got a bit better. So this concept of asking the student, do you genuinely know and understand that not just your brain, even my brain at my old age is still plastic, is still malleable. I can still grow new neural pathways and new neural networks through practice, through repetition. So we very much want to help the students believe that they can do this work. One of my favorite sentences that I'd like to say to a class at the start of the year or midway through or something like is just this kind of concept, and the same to parents and to my colleagues. And I love this, that we should be prepared to be surprised. The students should be prepared to be surprised that maybe they found it unbelievably hard last year, but maybe this year will be different because of their maturity, their ability to suddenly think more abstractly, that might have evolved and developed. And you don't notice as much as you notice kind of getting taller and those sorts of things. But there is a maturing in your ability to think abstractly from concrete through to abstract thinking. But be surprised as a teacher that student that you heard of might be a misbehaving student. Be surprised that it might change. Something might trigger in them and click in them. So this idea that the parent, the teacher, the student should be prepared to be surprised. Who knows what's in store for us in this topic, in this year, and so on. So I love that little phrase. From belief, I wanted to talk about passion. As David mentioned, at the lesson starters endeavours to give a hook. And I think a question you need to ask yourself is, what's my hook for the students here? How am I going to try to capture some enthusiasm, some interest, some curiosity? We hope the lesson starters are help, but I'm sure you've got many great examples or photos or stories of ways of you kind of showing the interest and the curiosity about learning these mathematical concepts. And secondly, I think it's just important to show your own passion. You know that your enthusiasm, your celebration of the progress, your excitement in what we're learning and what you're teaching can certainly rub off to the students. And the third one that I really wanted to talk about is this concept of progress. And the way I'd like us to think about it is firstly personalize it to you and say, can you actually, like literally right now, just give you kind of like 10 seconds, but can you think of a time when you've experienced the feeling of making progress? It might be you're getting a little bit better at your swimming, or you've been trying to learn how to kind of run 5K, or you've been learning a bit more about AI, or you've got a little bit better at cooking, or whatever. This feeling of progress is probably one of the universal feelings, human feelings, that is just deeply valued. I am getting a little bit better at my swimming at the moment. I'm still nowhere near a very good swimmer, but gosh, that sense of progress will make me go and try to have a swim. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe the next day, but sometime in the next 2 days, because I got a little bit quicker, or I went a bit further. And so we need to try to help our students see and feel progress. I think primary school teachers are very good at this through portfolio work. And maybe it's slightly easier when you go, look at your handwriting from the start of the year in year 2, or look at this progress. And maybe I think it's harder in secondary schools, but I think it is just as important. Here's a question for you. You've got a student in year 7 who got a C. You've got a student in year 8. That same student then went to year 8 and got another C. The same student then got to year 9 and got another C. I suspect that student and that parent think that they're not progressing at all. Of course, they are progressing. The maths is getting harder. They're still getting a C, which is, I think, the potential of why they think, see, I'm still no good at maths. And, you choose the letter to put there for the story or the narrative. When I was a maths teacher, I never actually asked a year 10 student, I never gave a year 10 student a year 7 maths test. And I wish I had of. And I'm curious about, is there a student, a student that's struggling to see progress in your class, and somehow, if you've got the time, you can individually say to that student, could I just give you this year 7 test? You know how you got a C on that a few years ago. And there's a good chance they'll get 90% on that. And they will have then seen their progress. So how do you, and I think the diagnostic tool is beautiful for it, the pre-test, the midway through, the post-test, the little scatter plot that Scott just showed of showing the growth rate. So please lean into these resources as you lean into your own relationship with your students to help them recognize progress, because that becomes such a great motivator. In many ways, the goal is this kind of Goldilocks zone of, can we make things not so hard that we get discouraged and not so easy that we get bored? And I know you know this, and I know you know how hard it is with your mixed ability classroom. And even if streamed within your stream classroom, there is still great diversity. And this is what makes teaching so challenging and demanding, and also rewarding. So when you look at that little strip on the right, this just right looks pretty high up this strip of the idea of where it is, this zone. And just right, there's actually a recent research study that suggests what this just right level is. Of course, I'm sure it's different for different people, and it's not as clear or as simple as this. But a research study done back in 2021 found that actually this 85% rule is the ideal rate for optimal learning. You want people to succeed 85% of the time for them to be at the optimal rate of learning. Now, the way they did this research was on animal learning and also on machine learning, and the way they're teaching some of the machines AI. And what they find is the best progress of growth comes when you get the vast majority of right. Now, I think that 85, when I first saw that, feels higher than I imagined. I thought, maybe 70% is a pretty good level. Of course, you want to get a bit more right than wrong. So 60, 70, 80%, but that's quite high. And if this is the optimal rate of learning, no matter how difficult it is for us, we kind of have a little bit of a responsibility to try to work out how to give that child that level of success so that we can optimize their learning. And they might still be at the moment, 3 years behind, and certainly not easy for the child, not easy for the teacher. But if we can give them the optimal learning rate, they might be 2 years behind, and so on. And so I challenge you collectively and gently with this idea of this 85% rule. There's a beautiful book that you might like to read as an adult, not particularly for your students, but just this idea of measuring the gain, not the gap. Often we kind of think of, look at all I still need to do. I still don't get all this. And can we instead, as much as possible, help people see, particularly I'm talking about the students that are finding a low love of maths, ones finding maths particularly difficult, particularly what the core series is there to help, and what a power if that can help some students' engagement and success in mathematics. Sure, if the student's going well, the achievement will look after itself, and they can push themselves and probably accept a lower rate of success to drive them. But for a student that kind of doesn't have that sense of self-belief, can we help them see the gain, the progress they've made from the start of the term, from the start of the topic, from the start of the year? You may know that as humans, we do have a negativity bias. It's far easier to notice, to dwell on, to talk about things that go wrong, what goes wrong, what I'm hopeless at, what my mistakes are, what I stuffed up. And this little cartoon, I think, highlights it pretty beautifully. There's so many good things in a student's day and in a student's life, but there are some bad things and some challenges, and quite often the individual, our brain gets so focused on that as we ruminate over. And so our challenge is to try to help us and see the success, see the growth, see the progress. So as I mentioned, to complement the core series, which is designed to provide students with success, can we encourage you to support the student's sense of self-belief, support the student's passion through your own passion and through the hooks, and also help them notice and see, and even more importantly, feel their progress in your subject. I close with a final slide of another quote that I very much enjoy. And it goes like this, and this is as much to take the pressure off you as the teacher. If an egg is broken by an outside force, life ends. If an egg is broken by an inside force, life begins. Great things always begin from the inside. And this is the motivating to the student to be the one breaking the egg from the inside as they surprise themselves, as they are motivated to try, to believe in themselves, to use the resources to grow their potential in mathematics. As a teacher, we don't want to break the egg from the outside force, nor do the parents. We want to nurture that sense of belief and help them break their egg from the inside.